Since the dawn of cinema, Hollywood has always carried an almost supernatural glow. A place where dreams take shape, where stories come to life on big screens, and where names become legends. However, behind the cameras and the carefully crafted aesthetics, there is a less visible layer, but no less present. Over time, reports began to emerge, repetitive coincidences and symbolic patterns that defy any simple logical explanation. For many, they would be just exaggerations fueled by paranoid minds. For others, fragments of something much deeper. Major productions repeat the same signs. Award shows display choreographies and aesthetics that resemble initiatory ceremonies more than entertainment events. Idols rise and fall as theatrically as the characters they portray. Is there a reason for this? Is Hollywood just selling stories or fabricating myths under more veiled orders? Welcome to another night where the mysteries never sleep. I am Midnight, and this is 7 Nights. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for your help. Like the video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it makes a huge difference so that YouTube can deliver the videos to more people, and so I can continue bringing this content to you. I'm counting on you. Let's go to the video. Let's start at the beginning. You know the name Hollywood? Many people have never stopped to think about it, but it carries a curious detail. Holly, in direct translation from English, is Azavinho, holly, a plant used by ancient druids to make magic wands. This wood was associated with energy manipulation and illusion. Now think, an entire industry dedicated to creating fictional realities, founded with a name linked to European occultism. Coincidence? Maybe. But it's already a good reason to take a closer look. In the early decades of cinema, while technology was evolving and theaters were filling with people amazed by the first projections, another movement was gaining strength behind the scenes. Esoteric orders like the Theosophical Society, Ordo Templi Orientis, and Rosicrucian groups were spreading across the United States, especially in California. They attracted intellectuals, artists, and influential people. And not by chance, these same people were in the circles where cinema was being born. It's not a theory, it's a fact. Figures connected to these groups were present in Hollywood's creative circles. That doesn't mean every movie was a ritual, of course. But many of these artists worked with archetypes, symbols, and narrative structures that came from ancient traditions. Jung spoke of universal archetypes, the hero, the journey, the sacrifice. But when these elements appear mixed with pyramids, all-seeing eyes, and masked figures, then it becomes hard to ignore. Things get even stranger when we look at the structure of the industry. Studios functioned almost like secret orders. Ironclad contracts, total control over the image of stars, strict rules, and a hierarchy where only those at the top knew everything that was going on. What does that remind you of? A regular corporation? Or something closer to an initiatory order, where the newcomer must prove themselves before gaining access to true knowledge? From early on, Hollywood had its scandals. Actors disappearing, careers abruptly cut short, behaviors deemed strange that were attributed to the stress of fame. But some of these cases have details that were never fully explained. Filming locations marked with symbols, enigmatic statements recorded in interviews, patterns repeated across different studios. All very well covered up at the time. There's also the case of Kenneth Anger, an underground filmmaker openly connected to the OTO, one of the orders founded by Aleister Crowley. Anger produced films filled with occult symbolism, with visual elements taken directly from grimoires and rituals. He never hid his influences. On the contrary, he inspired an entire generation of musicians and directors who reached the mainstream. Over time, these symbols stopped being taboo. They began to appear in music videos, major productions, award shows. And the strangest thing, sometimes they didn't even make sense within the story. They were just there, as if they had to be. An all-seeing eye at the back of the stage. A choreography with gestures of mystical origin. A costume referencing Sumerian deities. If it's not gratuitous, then what is the purpose? In occult traditions, repeating symbols is a ritual act. It's a way of shaping the collective unconscious, fixing ideas, opening portals, even if symbolic ones. If cinema is the art of projecting ideas into the minds of the masses, the deliberate use of symbols can't be just aesthetic. It may be part of something much larger, something that operates in the background. Even the buildings have stories. Classic theaters in Los Angeles were built with architecture inspired by ancient temples, with columns, solar symbols, and mythological figures. There are reports, recorded in old diaries, that secret meetings were held there, away from the spotlight, attended by names the public only knew from the screen. They knew exactly where they were stepping. All of this may sound fantastical to those hearing it for the first time. But the problem is, none of it comes from a single source. They are fragments scattered across decades of history, connected by symbols, patterns, and a strange coherence. We can no longer look at Hollywood merely as a dream factory. In many cases, it seems more like a ritual theater where each element has a defined role. Could it be that this symbolic veil was always there, right in front of us, and we just didn't know how to see it? After understanding the mysterious origins of Hollywood itself, it becomes easier to start noticing the symbols. They're everywhere, only we don't always see them. In movies, music videos, album covers, even on award show stages. What was once discreet is now blatant. The question is, why use these images? And more importantly, who decides they should be there? The most repeated symbol, without a doubt, is the eye. The so-called all-seeing eye, often associated with the pyramid and found on the back of the US dollar bill, is a well-known element of esoteric symbolism. Its origin dates back to ancient Egypt, but it was later absorbed by orders such as the Illuminati and Freemasonry. In Hollywood, it appears in action films, dramas, animations, and even comedies. And it doesn't always make sense within the plot. It's there because it has to be. Another common symbol is the pyramid. It often appears in the background, and sometimes in gestures made by the celebrities themselves, such as when they position their hands to form a triangle. These gestures appear surprisingly often in music videos and promotional photos. Some say it's just a stylish pose. But when the same gesture shows up in different contexts, with different artists, year after year, without any direct connection, it starts to seem more like a pattern than a coincidence. And that's not all. Butterflies, especially the monarch butterfly, appear in music videos, tattoos, and costumes. According to several studies tied to mind control theories, this symbol is associated with an alleged program known as Monarch, a branch of the MKUltra project. Of course, the existence of such a program in entertainment is officially denied, but the visual associations keep appearing, and no one seems to question why. There's also the black and white checkerboard pattern, the Masonic floor. It appears in videos, on stages, in films, always marking specific moments, revelations, loss of control, personality shifts. Entire choreographies seem to follow specific symbolism, as if they were staging something ritualistic in prime time. Why follow this kind of aesthetic? Why repeat patterns associated with secret orders and global events? Many people say it's just coincidence, or that directors use these images because they are visually striking. But when the same symbols appear in dozens of different productions, directed by people from different countries with different studios, can we still believe it's all just coincidence? Or is there a hidden language, a kind of silent communication that only some fully understand? It's also curious how these symbols show up more intensely during moments of high exposure. Award shows like the Grammys, the VMAs, and the Super Bowl don't hold back on performances with clear ritualistic references. Hoods, fire, eyes, horns, ancient symbolism mixed with futuristic aesthetics. Is it entertainment, or a well-scripted enactment with camouflaged messages? One example that always stands out is the Montero video by Lil Nas X, where the artist descends into hell on a pole and interacts with a demonic figure. The imagery is too symbolic to ignore. Another case was Katy Perry's performance at the 2014 Grammys, which many described as a full-blown occult ritual reenactment. Regardless of the intent, the message it sends is heavy and loaded, and those who pay attention feel it. Even Disney, responsible for shaping generations with its animations, has been questioned. Some scenes in classic films show quick images, sometimes shadows or background symbols, that fit perfectly within the occult symbology discussed here. Are these messages being subtly delivered from an early age? No one is claiming here that all artists are aware of this. Many may just be following creative directions, wearing the costume, making the gesture, stepping onto the set. But who creates these elements? Who decides the themes, the references, the symbols? The final decision is rarely in the performer's hands. At this point, it's no longer possible to treat these symbols as mere decoration. They follow a pattern, have traceable origins, and have been used consistently for decades. And the more you observe, the clearer it becomes. There is a hidden language being used, a kind of silent code that runs through entertainment like an invisible thread, connecting productions, events, and images in a network that many would rather not see. There comes a time of year when the whole world turns its eyes to the same place. Red carpets, gala dresses, emotional speeches. But what if these events weren't just celebrations of art? What if, behind the ceremony, something much more symbolic was taking place? It may seem like an exaggeration at first glance, but when you look at the details carefully, a pattern begins to emerge that intrigues even the most skeptical. Let's take the Super Bowl as an example. It's one of the biggest televised events on the planet, and its halftime show has become a showcase of symbolism. In several editions, artists have taken the stage wearing outfits or making gestures tied to rituals. There have been crowns of thorns, giant eyes, ancient gods represented in holograms, flames, invocations, and pyramid structures. It's not just a striking aesthetic. In many traditions, this combination of elements is linked to symbolic processes of transformation or sacrifice. At the Grammy and VMA Awards, the situation is similar. Some years it seems like all the costumes follow the same dark theme. Black and red clothing, references to ancient entities, inverted crosses, gestures reminiscent of initiatory orders. Choreographed performances, as if they were small ritualistic enactments. And when this happens once or twice, we might overlook it. But when it repeats year after year, with different artists, it's hard not to notice the pattern. One example that always resurfaces is Madonna's performance at the 2012 Super Bowl. She enters as a kind of Babylonian goddess, surrounded by figures resembling Roman soldiers and ancient deities. All of it staged with lighting, soundtrack, and effects that create an almost liturgical atmosphere. This performance, according to many scholars of symbolism, follows the structure of an invocation ritual. But in a halftime show, Sam Smith's performance at the 2023 Grammy Awards also caused quite a stir. The artist appeared with horns in a red-lit setting, surrounded by dancing figures that resembled invocations. The song, of course, was about something personal, but the visual choices directly referenced infernal imagery. Was it merely artistic provocation, or is there a deeper reason behind such choices? And this is exactly where the most uncomfortable part comes in, the so-called symbolic sacrifices. Over the last few decades, several celebrities have had meteoric rises followed by abrupt downfalls, scandals, or even deaths under strange circumstances. Theorists claim that some of these trajectories follow the classic model of ascension and sacrifice rituals, something that exists in various ancient cultures. Cases like Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, and even more recent artists like Avicii and Mac Miller are frequently cited. This is not to claim anything with certainty, but the patterns are questionable. Moments of absolute success followed by sudden isolation, strange behaviors, and in some cases, deaths surrounded by silence and rushed official explanations. There's also the matter of dates. Some of these losses occur at times that, for those who study occult calendars, coincide with ritualistic dates. Specific days for sacrifice, transition, or offering. It could all be just coincidence. But what if those coincidences happen over and over? Another aspect is the stage itself. Many of the sets used in these events feature specific geometric shapes, mirrors, staircases, and passages that symbolize portals or transitions. There's an entire visual construction that, for those who understand symbolism, goes far beyond aesthetic beauty. It's as if every detail was designed to represent something the general audience doesn't perceive, but that is still there. These events are broadcast worldwide. Billions of eyes watch, cheer, applaud, and without knowing it, they participate in a massive visual and symbolic experience. This doesn't mean they're being literally manipulated, but rather that they're being repeatedly exposed to patterns that can subtly shape perceptions and beliefs. What is really being celebrated on these stages? Talent and art, or something much older, coded in rituals that date back to eras where spectacle and the sacred walked hand in hand? In Hollywood, the rise can be as swift as the fall. And sometimes, that fall doesn't seem natural. There are celebrities who, after reaching overwhelming success, simply vanish from the media, suffer public breakdowns, or become surrounded by scandals that appear out of nowhere. The media treats it as emotional instability. But when you look closer, there's something strange in how it repeats, almost like a ritualistic cycle. Take the case of Britney Spears. She was the image of the perfect star in the late 90s and early 2000s. But in 2007 came the breakdown. Shaving her head in public, vacant stares, forced hospitalization, and years later, the revelation that she lived under a strict and highly controlling conservatorship. What began as fame turned into imprisonment. But what really triggered such a drastic transition? Just instability, or something she saw and refused to accept? Jim Carrey is another name that stands out in this pattern. After years at the top, he began giving strange interviews, talking about the illusion of fame and the artificiality of Hollywood. In one of those moments, he publicly stated, with an ironic smile, that the show is controlled by forces you can't imagine. Many laughed, thinking it was a joke, but he seemed serious and gradually distanced himself from the very industry that made him a star. Kanye West is another example. One of the most awarded and influential artists of the century, yet he periodically breaks from the norm. He once stormed the stage to interrupt an award ceremony, made public statements about media control, and even got involved in controversial political campaigns. In one interview, he went so far as to claim that invisible forces were trying to silence people like him. Madness, as many said, or someone trying to show us something they weren't supposed to. This kind of trajectory is common enough to raise suspicions. Celebrities who seem to be on the rise suddenly start behaving off script. They are institutionalized, discredited, isolated. And there's always a common denominator: the distancing from a carefully crafted image system. It's as if, in trying to leave the machine, they are publicly discredited or socially sacrificed. Many researchers call this process an initiatory fall. In occult traditions, the initiate goes through a symbolic collapse, loses everything, faces chaos, is destroyed in order to be reborn. In Hollywood, that destruction isn't symbolic. It's public. Millions watch. And the rebirth doesn't always happen. Whitney Houston had one of the most powerful voices in music. At the height of her career, her image quickly deteriorated. Rumors of addiction, family conflicts, isolation. Until her death in a hotel, the night before the Grammy Awards, which went on as planned, with tributes and spotlights. Years later, her daughter would die in a similar manner. Coincidence, or a repetition of a dark pattern? There are also those who try to return. Amanda Bynes, a childhood star from Nickelodeon, had a promising career before vanishing and later reappearing in troubling situations. She wore bizarre outfits, made incoherent posts, and seemed trapped in a cycle of breakdowns. When she finally regained some autonomy, the scars were already visible. What happened during those years of silence? Control theorists claim that these falls are part of a deliberate process. When a star tries to break away from the narrative, they are publicly dismantled. There are no open doors for those who challenge the system from within. And the higher the status, the more violent the fall. Is it a coincidence that so many artists have such similar stories? We can't say what's real or symbolic in each case. But the patterns exist, and ignoring them is settling for the surface. When the same situations happen repeatedly with different names at different times, one must ask, what is the price of seeing too much? And who really controls the backstage of fame? Perhaps stardom is not the peak, but the first part of a much more complex and dangerous game than the public could ever imagine. If you've ever wondered why so many child stars end up with such dark fates, you're not alone. It's one of those patterns no one likes to talk about, but once you start paying attention, it becomes hard to ignore. Early fame, a flawless public image, and then the collapse. Almost like a script that repeats itself, generation after generation. Let's talk about it, because there's something very strange about this cycle. Children who grew up on screen, with millions of fans and million-dollar contracts, ending up involved in scandals, emotional breakdowns, rehab, and silence. And the most disturbing part is that this path often seems programmed, not just by the pressure of fame, but perhaps by something deeper, darker. You may have heard of so-called monarch programming. It's a theory that links the entertainment world to mind control techniques allegedly derived from the MKUltra project, a real CIA program from the 1950s and 60s. Yes, it existed. The US government admitted to testing psychological manipulation methods using hypnosis, drugs, electric shocks, and trauma induction. The darkest part? Some victims claim they were programmed from childhood. And that's where the theory intersects with Hollywood. According to researchers, this model of mind control infiltrated parts of pop culture, especially in the careers of child stars. The symbol that always appears is the monarch butterfly, which, they say, represents the forced transformation of the mind. Coincidence or not, it appears in music videos, tattoos, costumes, and scenes that go unnoticed by those not paying close attention. Remember Miley Cyrus? She's a classic example. She started as Hannah Montana, Disney's perfect girl. Then came the rupture, a radical shift in image, provocative performances, and statements about not knowing who she was anymore. In one interview, she even said she felt like two different people. It may sound like identity crisis, until you realize other stars say the same thing. Demi Lovato, for example, spoke in interviews about hearing voices, losing control, sudden breakdowns. Amanda Bynes disappeared for years, came back with a completely different appearance and behavior, then vanished again. Lindsay Lohan, who grew up in front of cameras, also went through rehab, isolation, and strange episodes that were never fully explained. It's hard to ignore when the pattern is always the same. And where did most of them come from? Disney, the company that, more than any other, shaped childhoods for generations. Of course, this doesn't mean the company itself is behind anything sinister, but it raises an uncomfortable question. Could there be a system, a culture behind the scenes, that crosses the line between artistic direction and manipulation? Some people think it's exaggerated, but we can't forget that the industry itself has used subliminal messaging in the past. That's a fact. Techniques of visual suggestion, rapid cuts, hidden symbolism, all of it has been studied for decades. And in content aimed at children, the repetition of certain elements can shape behavior, or at least condition young minds to accept certain patterns. The most tragic part is that these children, as they grow up, often struggle to cope with their memories. Some report blank periods, others speak as if they lived outside their own bodies. Words like automaton, control, and inner voice frequently appear in their accounts. Again, it could just be the weight of fame, but what if it's the symptom of something implanted long ago? Were these child stars truly guided to success, or programmed to fulfill a much larger role than they could have ever imagined? There's something curious that happens in certain films, the feeling that what's being told is more than just a story, that behind the lines and special effects, there's a hidden message. Something that feels so real, you leave the theater wondering, was that really just fiction? Or was someone trying to say something? It's an old idea. Since the beginning of cinema, artists and directors have used metaphors to talk about the real world. But some cases go beyond common symbolism. These are films that, scene after scene, build such a specific portrayal of power structures, rituals, and mind control that many people began to see them as a kind of warning, a veiled denunciation. Let's start with a classic example, Eyes Wide Shut by Stanley Kubrick. The film was released in 1999, just months before the director's death. In the story, an ordinary man accidentally enters a secret ritual of a masked elite, where nothing is as it seems. What stands out isn't just the content, but the way the ritual is portrayed. Venetian masks, codes, submission, ancient symbols. This isn't typical social criticism. It feels like an almost documentary-style representation of rituals, described by whistleblowers from closed power circles. And it doesn't stop there. Films like Fight Club and Inception are often mentioned in these analyses. Fight Club shows a man living a double life without realizing it, dominated by a version of himself created by the system. Inception explores control of the subconscious through implanted dreams, a metaphor that fits perfectly with mass manipulation theories. What do these films have in common? A critique of control, the idea that perceived reality might actually be a carefully constructed illusion. And that brings up a question that's hard to ignore. Are these films revealing real-world codes, hidden under the pretense of art? Or are they merely involuntary reflections of a truth many feel, but can't quite name? At times, it seems like the artists themselves are trying to warn us, within the limits they're still allowed to use. This also appears in cartoons and children's series, which sometimes carry scenes and messages that seem absurdly mature or even disturbing for their intended audience. Some plots speak of mind control, parallel dimensions, loss of identity. When this repeats often, especially in major franchises, the question arises, who writes these scripts? And why choose those themes? Even music videos show this. Just think of Beyoncé's performance in Haunted, or Billie Eilish's videos, which mix themes of mind manipulation, psychiatric settings, and figures resembling entities. The aesthetic might be part of the art, but where does this obsession with certain symbols come from? Many theorists believe Hollywood functions as a kind of release valve, a place where dangerous truths are turned into fiction as a form of collective relief. Reality is shown, but in disguise. That way, the public absorbs it, feels it, becomes unsettled, but doesn't act. Because, after all, it was just a movie. And this raises an uncomfortable question. Is this strategy used on purpose? To show the truth, but in such a diluted way that it seems like mere entertainment. That way, anyone who notices is labeled a conspiracist, and those who don't remain calm. In the end, these films, songs, and performances might be doing more than entertaining. They may be shaping perspectives, cracking open the collective perception, or simply saying what no one dares to speak aloud. And if that's the case, how many truths have already been revealed before our very eyes, and we didn't even notice? After all this, it becomes hard to look at Hollywood the same way. What once seemed like pure entertainment takes on deeper, almost symbolic contours. Studios born amidst esoteric circles, symbols repeated like visual mantras, ceremonies resembling ancient rituals, and public downfalls that follow eerily ritualistic patterns. Nothing is declared, everything is suggested. And precisely because of that, it remains hidden, in plain sight. This story is just one piece, and maybe one day, you'll see the entire puzzle. If this made you think too, subscribe and like the video. It helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share. After all, more voices mean more discoveries.